CP123955. Recording length 03 minutes and 58 seconds. This recording was created using www.spokentext.net. Does the CPUSA advocate the violent overthrow of the government? Don't all communists advocate violence? The actual sentence referring to violent revolution in the Communist Manifesto says, in depicting the most general phases of the development of the proletariat, we trace the more or less failed civil war raging within existing society, up to the point where that war breaks out into open revolution, and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie lays the foundation for the sway of the proletariat. This is more a description than a prescription. We are for peace, for peaceful solutions to both international and international problems, and for a peaceful transition to socialism, wherever possible. This has become ever more essential in the nuclear age. While some governments run by people calling themselves communists have been responsible for horrible acts of violence and repression, notably the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia, much if not most of the violence often blamed on revolutionary governments and parties is actually the responsibility of the conservative, reactionary, capitalist governments and parties. Many revolutions have been relatively peaceful, including the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the Vietnamese Revolution of 1945. The bloodshed comes when those formerly in power initiate a civil war, or foreign armies invade, trying to re-establish capitalist, feudal, or colonial power. This was true in Russia. There was not only a civil war, there was an invasion, by 14 countries including the U.S., trying to topple the revolutionary government. This was true in Vietnam, when the former colonial power invaded Indochina in a vain attempt to re-establish their control of the people, resources, economics, and politics of the region. Again, the responsibility for most of the violence rests on a deposed ruling class, in this case the French government, supported by the United States. After the Vietnamese defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu, there was a negotiated Geneva settlement, ending the military conflict, partitioning the country, and setting democratic elections for 1956. The United States was responsible for abrogating that agreement, an international treaty with the supposed force of law. Eisenhower, U.S. President at the time, later explained that if the U.S. had allowed elections to be held in 1956, Ho Chi Minh would have won 80% of the vote. So the U.S. prevented democracy, supported the corrupt South Vietnamese government, and eventually invaded. Bourgeois apologists ignore the violence inherent in the system of capitalism, the often hidden violence of on-the-job injury and death, of great social ills directly traceable to the shortcomings of the system, such as the tragically high infant mortality rate in many of our inner cities. Maintaining the capitalist system means maintaining an anti-people, anti-humanist criteria. Under capitalism, profit is the main or sole deciding force over the lives, health, and deaths of millions of workers. It is beyond the scope of an answer such as this to respond fully to all questions of violence. And we have been guilty of ignoring crimes of governments led by communists, such as the crimes of Stalin and Beria. But these are not simple questions. It is not an either-or proposition. Either communists are guilty or the capitalists are guilty. While we think that an objective, detailed analysis of most situations over the last century would conclude that capitalist and reactionary governments and parties are responsible for most of the violence, it is true that communists have engaged in armed struggle, are not pacifists, and that some who call themselves communists have engaged in repressive tactics. This recording was created using Spoken Text, the free online text-to-speech converter. To learn more about Spoken Text, visit www.spokentext.net.